I'm going to start today with this poll question, not for you to answer as a poll question, but for you to think about how my students would have answered this question. Each year when I start my STEM class, I ask students to respond to the prompt, when will climate change impact life on Earth? The most popular of these choices has earned over a third of the vote, just over a third of the vote over the 4 years I've been asking it. And the least popular choice has garnered around 4% of the vote. Feel free to drop your guess in the chat. Which choice is most commonly selected and which is the least popular choice out of these 5? So many of us perceive climate change as the inevitable price tag of 2.5 centuries of living that has taken place since the start of the Industrial Revolution. A debt that has accumulated over the last 250 years that we now owe as payment for the light bulb and the assembly line and the cotton gin and the steam engine. But in fact, and all you math magicians watching can confirm this from this graph, more than half of the carbon released into the atmosphere by the burning of fossil fuels has been emitted just in my lifetime, meaning that we can't blame all the unwitting members of past generations for the disaster that confronts us today. When I was born in 1975, scientists had long understood the greenhouse effect, understood the blanket of our atmosphere was necessary for life on Earth, but they were just beginning to see and acknowledge that the excessive carbon released into the atmosphere by the burning of coal and wood and oil and gas would add heat holding capacity to our air and turn our greenhouse into a hothouse. 46 years ago, scientists knew that humans had the potential to knock natural systems out of balance and trigger a climate catastrophe, but it seemed like much more of a spooky prophecy than a looming reality. Fast forward to the beginning of my 40s, when the climate system was tipping towards devastation, and we hovered at the precipice of 400 parts per million carbon in Earth's atmosphere that had been the bright red line drawn by scientists, the line that warned absolutely do not cross. And of course, we crossed it. And we kept going. The year of my 45th birthday, the average carbon dioxide level was 412.5 parts per million. And it is now the highest it has been in over 3 million years. If the planet was brought to the brink of climate disaster within the lifetime of a single generation, my generation, the responsibility to avoid it also belongs with just a single generation, and that's that of our students. To paraphrase Dr. Seuss, they are in charge of the last of the truffula trees. But it seems my generation is muffing it once again because we are failing to make our students aware of the urgency of this crisis. Look at the responses to the poll question I showed on my first slide. 96% of my students don't know that climate change has already begun to alter life as we know it. Put another way, only 4% of them realize that the call is coming from inside the house. These numbers are disappointing, but as I look around classrooms filled with awkwardness and acne and a miraculous amount of untapped potential, I realize that just as the climate crisis is not their fault, neither is their lack of awareness of its existence. The Center for Climate Communication at Yale surveyed thousands of full-grown adults, actual adults, as Danielle called them earlier, nationwide, and produced this incredible data set. Broken down by county, you can see that the estimated percentage of adults who understand that climate change is happening varies by location, but amounts to a national average of 72%, meaning almost 1 in 4 adults don't believe in global warming. There are likely a number of factors that contribute to a lack of understanding of the basic facts of climate change, but I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that when it comes to our students, they don't know what they haven't been taught. Oren Pismoni-Levy and Erica Kessler from the Center for Sustainable Futures at Teachers College at Columbia University surveyed the sustainability coordinators in the DOE, an individual from each school who volunteered or was voluntold to lead that school's efforts to be more environmentally friendly. Of the 1,258 sustainability coordinators who completed this survey, 26% don't teach about climate change at all, 22% barely mention it, 21% dedicate just 1 to 2 lessons per year to a topic that is the existential threat to the future well-being of our students, our communities, and our city. Imagine how different my own students' responses would have been to that first question if we could flip this pie chart around and instead lived in a world where only 5% of sustainability coordinators didn't get a chance to teach about climate change. I know it can be tricky to broach the topic of our climate future in the classroom. As you look over this graph, which shows the reasons that sustainability coordinators don't teach or talk about climate change, I'm sure that many of the responses are familiar to you. Not on this list, but perhaps just as important, is that the numbers associated with climate change are tough to teach. They're stunning yet insubstantial, overwhelmingly terrifying yet kind of meaningless. For example, it can be hard to get worked up over the difference between 2 degrees and 4 degrees Celsius of warming. Nearly impossible to imagine investing so much of our limited classroom resources, like our time, our energy, our supplies, in trying to get students to care about gradual changes to a few numbers over the next 5 to 10 decades. Think back to that opening question again. I suspect we are fast approaching a point where the conditions around us will make it nearly impossible for anyone to choose anything other than option 5. Climate change is happening now, and everyone and everything will be affected by it. If the planet were to warm by just 2 degrees Celsius, massive ice sheets would collapse into the oceans. 400 million more people will suffer from water scarcity, and in the northern latitudes, heat waves will kill thousands each summer. Significantly worse, at 4 degrees warming, whole regions of Africa and Australia and the United States, parts of South America north of Patagonia, and Asia south of Siberia would be rendered uninhabitable by direct heat, desertification, and flooding. Those numbers are significantly more staggering than they are inspirational. It's hard to find a good balance between teaching our kids and scaring them. For example, I have students view this visualization of carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere from NASA's Climate Change Time Machine website, and then use this data to create 3 world maps. One that represents carbon dioxide levels in April of 2003, one that shows the data from April 2013, and lastly, a prediction of what global carbon dioxide levels will look like in April 2023. That one created a spike in demand for red-colored pencils. After showing this visualization to one class, a student with a stricken look on her face asked with just heartbreaking despair, "But Miss, what are we going to do?" Great question, Chloe. And therein lies yet another reason to avoid this topic in our classrooms. It is so damn depressing. But this is a challenge that we as educators need to overcome. Recent research shows that if only 16% of high school students in high and middle income countries were to receive climate change education, we could see a nearly 19 gigaton reduction in carbon dioxide outputs by 2050. When education helps students develop a strong connection to their role in our climate future, as well as a sense of personal agency and empowerment, it can have consequential impacts on students' daily behaviors and decision-making that reduces their overall lifetime carbon footprint. These numbers don't lie. It might be the single most powerful thing a teacher can do to protect our students and our planet's future. So how do we teach about this monumentally consequential topic without simultaneously instilling a sense of helplessness in the face of imminent disaster? What I've learned with my students is that instead of making them feel they have to save the world, help them see how to save their own communities. They can start thinking about ways to build local resilience in the face of the inevitable and reduce the inequities and impacts that will be felt in New York City's diverse communities. For example, my students and I have spent a lot of time this year measuring the temperature of different surfaces around our school: cement, pavement, dirt, and grass. Their data shows that pavement can be as much as 30 degrees hotter than grass on warm, sunny days. There's the slide it was missing. 30 degrees hotter than grass on warm, sunny days, and close to 25 degrees hotter than cement. This has triggered a lot of whining about the paved schoolyard versus the adjacent administrator's parking lot that's covered in cement. But following the whining and without prompting, my students began to think of solutions. What if we painted the pavement? What if we planted some trees? What if we replaced the asphalt with grass? Any or all of those things might make our community a little more resilient as extreme heat days increase in frequency in the coming years. There are other teachers around the city who are finding ways to incorporate climate change and resilience education into their teaching as well. Even as we were practicing for these talks, Jessica, who spoke right before me, described how she planned to help students investigate the energy efficiency of their building and propose changes to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm guessing that many of us could find the opportunity to turn our students into change makers, even if it is only within the context of our school community. It's like that old hallmarky story of the starfish tosser, which I will describe in far less romantic language. There was a kid walking down the beach, throwing stranded starfish back into the water, and some busybody says to him, "You'll never get to enough to make a difference." And the kid chucks another starfish into the ocean and replies, "I made a difference to that one." I was once lucky enough to talk to Pete Seeger, who at the age of 89 had his head so full of stories and songs that it was hard to get a word in edgewise. But as we stood next to the splendid sloop Clearwater, a boat that grew out of his passion for the Hudson River Valley, Pete told me it wasn't humans' ability to create new technology that would save us or our planet. It was our ability to organize. Pete Seeger, folk legend and environmental icon, said to me, "Sarah, there is strength in numbers." It seems to me we have those numbers right here. We have access to a lot of young minds. If the 1,000 teachers in Math for America were each able to reach an average of 100 students per year, we could do a decent job of spreading an important message about the looming climate crisis. We have the ability to inspire our students to solve the problems that we have created and to give them the skills, the understanding, the empathy, the motivation to make their world a better place. Thank you.